Hello, this is Madcat, the Angry Egalitarian, and today is another impromptu show, sort of, about give Captain America a boyfriend. Now, many people have spoken about this issue, maybe to death, going on the basis of the Marvel Cinematic Universe and how it doesn't really make sense, to comic book fans and what is considered canon. I'm going to try to take a different approach on this and talk about it from the literary world. Now, what I mean by that is I'm a writer, and my life is spent analyzing story, understanding story. You know, every word that's used and how it's used and why it's used to understand characters themselves. And of course, I take this skill and I apply it to movies and video games and TV shows, which I think helps me gain a deeper understanding of characters than most people have. So with that, I'm going to try to explain the reason why this is a bad idea, but I'm going to go a little bit deeper than that and show you really where all of this is coming from, because this isn't something new. This has actually been going on for quite some time, and we kind of have to connect all of the dots to see the bigger picture. So let's go ahead and get started. A gay Captain America. Marvel fans debate hashtag demanding boyfriend for the first Avenger. Now, I'm not going to go too deep into this, but basically what we're seeing here is that people seem to think that it's better that Captain America have a boyfriend than some other people. And a lot of them are basically saying they want Bucky Barnes or the Winter Soldier to be the guy that Captain's with, or, you know, they're at least open to the possibility of it being someone else. Now, from the cinematic universe standpoint, I mean, he was dating Agent Carter in the first Avenger. Of course, she dies by Civil War, and it shows that he's now hooking up with her niece. So it's been apparent that he is heterosexual. So why now are we dealing with this idea that Captain America should be homosexual or even bisexual? He's made his intentions clear. He doesn't like women, but he puts duty above all else. And because he hasn't really secured a relationship with anyone, doesn't automatically make him gay. Although I'm surprised no one has mentioned Falcon should be his boyfriend, you know, make it a biracial romance. So let's go ahead and take a look at a couple of the tweets. Give Captain America a boyfriend has to be one of the dumbest things ever. If he didn't start out gay, then don't make him gay. Well, to be fair, people can make a change. You know, maybe later they decide, maybe I am gay, or I'll give this a try. Sucking dick actually seems pretty cool. I never would have guessed. I guess I'm gay now. So that to me is not good enough reason. I mean, it is one of the dumbest ideas. Give Captain America a boyfriend. He already has a female love interest. Why do people try to change characters? And that is really the big thing here, is that, and we'll kind of explore this today, of changing the characters around to suit the needs of a vast minority. You can't just make a straight gay. 1, straight isn't the default sexuality. 2, you're so right, he's definitely bi. Well, the thing is that straight is the default sexuality. And I know there's going to be a lot of social justice warriors like, no, you're wrong. It's called heteronormativity. I think I'm butchering that term, but it is an actual... Now, the social justice warriors will try to use it as a way of saying that I'm trying to hold transgendered people down, or I'm trying to hold gays and lesbians down. Here's the thing I want everyone to be aware of. The vast majority of the world is straight. The vast majority of anyone who's ever lived on this planet is straight. Do you know how I know that? Because there's so many of us living today. The fact that the human race has survived this long is indication that the vast majority of anyone who has ever lived was straight. Because if people were gay or lesbian, then we would not have as many people we do today. Now, I'm sure there's going to be some feminists and social justice warriors like, well, just because they had children doesn't mean they weren't gay. And certainly that's a possibility. But even today, in a world where it's actually a little more socially acceptable to come out as gay, and it is still such a minority of people that are actually gay. So that means that we should see being straight, being heterosexual is a default, because if it's not the default, then the human race won't survive that much longer. Now, I'm not saying that I'm against homosexuality. I'm not saying that homosexuality is a bad thing. I'm not. But for the most part, in order for the human species to survive, it requires that a lot of people are straight. So yes, heterosexual is the default sexuality. And we should assume that people are straight unless they give us some indication that they're not. Now, it doesn't mean automatically they're straight, but there's probably a strong suggestion they are, and we shouldn't be like, oh, well, we shouldn't do that. Yes, we should. Now, there is certainly the possibility that he could be bi, but he's not given any indication of that. And to suddenly prop up and it's like, oh, well, he's actually bi. And it's like, where was the setup for that? And that's one thing that people hate, is when you start retconning character details, the fans tend to hate that. That's something you have to set up from the beginning, not something to insert in there just because it'll be cool. And whether that's from a movie standpoint or the official canon of the character, you can't just insert that in there after the fact. That's why there are reboots done to try to get a certain characteristic added in when they do a reboot in order to get that, rather than add it after the fact. Because anytime they've done after the fact, it's kind of destroyed the character. Holy crap, not everyone needs to be gay. No, don't give him a boyfriend. Give him lots of boyfriends. Because I only watch superhero movies because I'm obsessed with the sexuality of the protagonist. Because sexuality is fluid. Kids need to know. They need to know that queer superheroes are real, valid, and just as badass. Now, there's one thing wrong with this, is that superheroes aren't real. Do you really think Superman is real? Do you think Batman is real? Do you think Tony Stark is real? And you know what? There are gay superheroes out there. Or if there isn't enough of them, let's create a new one. But let's not transform a character into being gay just because we live in a world now where it's more socially acceptable to be gay. And we'll cover that in just a moment, but I want to go through a couple of these tweets here. Steve Rogers fought 117 nations and gave up a shield for Bucky. If that's not love, I don't know what is. And this is something that actually bothers me a lot, is anytime male characters show any sort of emotions towards another male character, people start insisting that the characters are gay. And what Bucky and, Captain America have been through, whether it was within the first Avenger or, Civil War, there's nothing homoerotic about their connection to each other, and yet people want to insert it in there because they're close to each other. You know what? Brothers can be close to each other without there being any sexuality to it. Why is it that sexuality has to be part of the character's makeup? Why do we have to keep inserting it in there? Why do the social justice warriors demand that someone be defined by their sexuality? Because that's what they want to do. They want characters to be defined by their sexuality to be more inclusive. You know, it's possible to connect to a character that doesn't have everything that you are. It's possible for me to connect to a gay character just like it's possible for a gay person to connect to a straight person. They'll pair him with anyone, including his dead ex-girlfriend's niece, but not a man? No, because the character is not gay. He's not gay in the comic books, and he's not gay in the movies. There's been no indication that he is. And I thought it was weird that he hooked up with his ex-girlfriend's niece as well. I was just like, okay, there's some things that you need to tell a therapist there, but, you know, that's just what it is. I'm told that in the comic books, that's how it ended up being, is that he, you know, dated his ex-girlfriend's niece, and they ended up getting married and having children. So let me go ahead and start with my point today. So a lot of people feel that this is really a callback to the movie Frozen. More specifically, they want Elsa to have a girlfriend. And in fact, there was a campaign to try to get that done. And there seems to be a campaign lately to try to get Disney to have more gay characters. Okay, I see no problem with that. Now, I could really care less about Frozen. I haven't seen Frozen. I've heard of Frozen. I've seen, you know, CinemaSin's take on it, which is probably the most of the movie that I've ever seen of it. I really don't care. If Elsa's gay, let her be gay. I could care less. But I don't think that this is where it has started. And in order to understand where this current problem originated, we have to actually go back several years. We have to go back to Dumbledore. Why Dumbledore, you might be asking, for those who don't know what I'm referencing. When Harry Potter was released, well, after Harry Potter was released, J.K. Rowling made a statement. Now, I don't know the exact particulars of that statement she made, but it was actually pretty public. And I think it was about a year to 2 years ago that this happened, where she said that she believed that Dumbledore was gay. A lot of people already thought he was gay, but this just really confirmed it. But there was a backlash against J.K. Rowling. The LGBT community was actually angry with her. Why would they be angry? Because it was never mentioned in any of the books, and it was never mentioned in the movies themselves. Nothing had ever given a strong indication that Dumbledore was gay. Now, I had a friend at the time, and I'm like, why is it so important that Dumbledore be gay in the movies? And she's like, well, it would have given the LGBT representation, someone they could connect to. So the only people LGBT can connect to is gay characters. They can't connect to another character for another reason. It has to be gay. I further asked her, it's like, well, would the movie have changed in any way if it was revealed that Dumbledore was gay? And she's like, no. And I'm like, then why is it so important? I mean, the movie is called Harry Potter. It's not called Dumbledore. And because it's not called Dumbledore means that we don't see every aspect of his life. We only really see Dumbledore in relation to Harry Potter. It's not like Harry Potter is sneaking around Hogwarts to find out who's sleeping with who. Why is Professor Snape and Dumbledore in a room together? And why did they lock it? And what's all that banging going on? Would it have been so bad to have Dumbledore being gay? No. I really don't care if Dumbledore was gay. The problem that people have, though, is that in order for him to have identified himself as being gay would have required him to do something like that. Like he kissed someone or he talked about it in such a way that people could feel like, oh yeah, Dumbledore's gay, you know. The problem with that is then the character has transformed. Instead of being a wise wizard, he's now a wise gay wizard. Once we put sexuality into the mix, more specifically a minority sexuality, the character in a way is stripped away of their identity and is instead replaced with their sexuality. That the character is known for their sexuality. Now, probably one of my favorite characters, gay characters, is actually Jinx from Warehouse 13. What I like about him is not the fact that he's gay. I just like the character. Him being gay is really more of a coincidence that in this discussion here. But he's the first gay character I can think of off the top of my head. And the thing about him is the only way that we knew he was gay is when Claudia thought that he had a thing for her. And, it's like, oh, well, careful, guy, I kind of have a boyfriend. You can't be hitting on me. And he revealed he was gay. And, there was some mention here and there, but it wasn't his identity. He was an agent who had the unique ability to know whenever someone was lying, and he did a lot for the show. But anytime someone talks about gay characters, they never mention this character. And the only reason I can think of it is because it wasn't apparent that he was gay. He was rather a normal person who happened to be gay. He wasn't wearing assless chaps and multicolored shirts and girlfriend. He wasn't the stereotypical gay. He wasn't loud and proud, He was just a normal guy who happened to be gay. And it's always amazed me that no one ever talks about him as being a character when they talk about the lack of representation. He is the perfect representation of an LGBT character because his sexuality didn't define who he was. His actions, his ability, his personal life experiences defined who he was. The fact that he was gay was just kind of like flavoring. A little bit of salt that you put on your meal to taste a little bit better. And that's all it really was. And that's what characters should be. Oftentimes, characters' sexuality does not come up because it's not necessary for the plot. So, going back to Dumbledore, people were angry that he was not properly represented in the films as being gay. And this has kind of set off a chain reaction. Now, I'm not saying that it started here, but I think it's one of the major points in this long string of problems that we're now seeing that Elsa and Captain America must now be gay and that people are pushing for this. And I think that this is a major stop in the road is with Dumbledore, that people were upset that he was not in there. And what we see here is that the LGBT community, the feminists, the social justice warriors, they demand that characters be made for them that represent their viewpoints. And when there isn't a character, then it has to be sexist, racist, homophobic, what have you, against them. They demand that there's proper representation for them, because that's the only thing they define themselves as. And that's rather sad. There are other aspects of characters that you can get to know for other things. Sexuality shouldn't be the only thing. And yet, people were angry about this. The next stop along our way is the female Thor. Now, female Thor is a major representation of this problem, because this was like one of the first times we saw a character change gender. Now, you could say Battlestar Galactica when they changed Boomer from a black guy to an Asian girl, but I don't think that's really that big of a deal. Or when they changed Starbuck into a girl. Because in those instances, they weren't doing it for a political statement. They just made that choice. Maybe there was a political statement. But when I watched Battlestar Galactica, there was nothing about how girls were better than guys, or that girls feel oppressed by the patriarchy. I never felt that watching Battlestar Galactica. Maybe I should. So it has happened that there's been a gender flip. This, however, with female Thor, was a major gender flip for the purpose of social justice warriors. People were complaining that there are not enough female superheroes, which there were. There are plenty of them. You know, and some even suggested that when female Thor came out, that, you know, why not make a comic about Sif? You know, she was a badass female, but no. We had to take an already established character and change her gender entirely. And at first, this comic sold really well, and then they kind of stopped production on it because it stopped selling really well. Because the people who wanted the change were not customers. And the people who would have bought a comic book were not interested in this. It's not that they were sexist. It's just they weren't interested in reading a political discussion. I mean, there's one part in the comic where a female villain refuses to fight female Thor on the basis that they're women and they shouldn't be fighting each other. I'm like, what the fuck? Really? So, female Thor represents that companies were starting to give into the social justice warriors and saying, okay, we'll make this change for you. And instead of creating a new character, instead of using an already established female character and giving her her own line, they took a character, an already established character, kicked him out and said, we're now replacing you with a woman, just to appease the social justice warriors. Now, next was the transgendered issue of Samus Aran by Brianna Wu. Brianna Wu wanted Samus to be transgendered. Okay, that's all well and fine. If that's what you want, you can have it. But you can't expect the rest of us to accept that. Why would we? Why would we accept that when it's already been established that Samus was a woman? And yet, Brianna Wu wrote an entire article justifying how she felt that it should be canon that she was transgendered. That even though she looks female, she's actually a male. She actually has a penis. Because we never see her vagina. We don't need to see her vagina. And then she would criticize anyone for that was like, well, no, she's not. It's like, well, you're just transphobic. And it's like, no, we're not transphobic. The character has never really been that. And maybe there was some drawing board somewhere where someone had it, but that didn't make it into the final version of the story. This is something that happens a lot in fan fiction, and it actually annoys the hell out of me, is when someone writes a story that alters how the characters act in order to set up a situation. And you know what? I can't really control when they do that, but it doesn't mean I have to like it. And a few times that I've encountered this, I was like, oh, well, I don't like it. I don't believe the characters are real. And then I get accused of being a homophobe because Ron Weasley and Harry Potter, decide to have sex with each other. And it just makes no logical sense to me that these two characters would have sex, at least in this way. And now I'm a homophobe because I understand who the characters are and their actions better than the writer, but I can't accept that they'd sleep together. So this wasn't a major thing, but it did cause a little bit of controversy. So Dumbledore, Thor, Samus. Then there was this little nugget. Iceman being gay. Now, I don't know what the actual story behind this is because I'm not a comic book fan. I mean, I love the stories that were presented there, but I like reading novels, in all honesty. From what I understand, Jean Grey read Bobby Drake's mind and then blurted out, oh, by the way, you're gay. Which, even if he was, you don't just blurt shit out like that. That's not for you to do. Some have suggested that Jean Grey implanted the thought in his mind that he was gay, and then he believes it. And they made this whole controversy that even though the original character was not gay, this new representation of him is. So again, we're taking an already established character and making changes to him to fit someone else's needs, rather than create a whole new character that is gay. Then there was the Luke Skywalker incident. And let me go ahead and read this. I'll just read online. I just read online that JJ is very open to that, about having homosexual characters. In the old days, you would get fan mail, but now fans are writing and asking all of these questions. I'm bullied in school. I'm afraid to come out, they say to me. Could Luke be gay? I say it is meant to be interpreted by the viewer. If you think Luke is gay, of course he is. You should not be ashamed of it. Judge Luke by his character, not by who he loves. And of course the press said, oh, Mark Hamill said Luke Skywalker is gay. And it's like, no, that's not what he said. He said that if you choose to interpret it that way, have at it. But you should judge him by his actions and not which hole does he slide his dick into. And yet people wanted so desperately for this character to be gay, to have representation in the media, they created clickbait articles on the basis that Luke Skywalker was gay. And he's not. Now, of course, the extended universe has been shattered with the new movies, but it's like even I, who's not a fan of Star Wars, knew about Mara Jade. But it was like people were desperate. And this is what we're starting to see. Going from Dumbledore all the way up to Luke Skywalker, people are becoming desperate to have some sort of association of a gay character. But it's not that they want a new character to be gay. They want old characters to be gay. But more than that, we're also starting to see where characters are just being transformed, not into being gay, but to being minority characters. And this is where the literary bit comes into all of this. I know I've kind of discussed movies and comic books and whatnot, but within the writing world, it very much is a feminist world. The majority of writers I encounter are female. Now, most of the time, we just talk about writing. Does this sentence make sense? Can someone help me understand this? What's the best way to market my book? Things like that. Not a big deal. Every now and then, I see something like I said, don't be afraid to include minority characters in your story. Okay, good advice. But what she was specifically meaning, because this kind of carried out in conversation, is I told her that's all well and good, but it's like my story, Dagar Legacy, takes place in medieval Europe, specifically medieval France. And the problem that lies is that like 99.9999999% of the people living in France during that time were white. It's not to say that there weren't minority characters there. It's just that they were white. And yet, and she didn't really come down on me, but she was saying that, you know, people have this default of creating only white characters and not really giving a whole lot of thought of having minority characters. Okay, that's true, but she then said that, you know, it's important to have minority characters in your story. That's not necessarily true. You don't have to have minority characters in your story for it to be a good story. In fact, having minority characters in your story doesn't automatically make it a good story. And what I'm seeing in the literary world now, especially in the self-publishing community, is people want to have all of these minority characters everywhere they can. They start with the premise of, how can I make this character more of a minority? What kind of political message can they send? Well, I'm going to put a black person in here and no white people whatsoever. Or I'm going to have a gay character who's going to be really, really badass and can do anything and everything and nothing bad ever happens to them. Oh, wait, what? That's so fucking boring. You basically are creating a bunch of Mary Sues that just so happen to be some sort of minority. And this is just happening so much. And it has always been my philosophy of do what the story demands, not just insert things at random. And what I mean by that is, even though my story takes place in medieval France, I do have one character that I introduced in there who happens to be Hispanic. He has a darker skin color. He's also Jewish. And initially I made him a Jew and I wanted him to be part of the Templar Order. Well, how would a Jew be a part of a Christian secret society? That wouldn't make sense. And I found a way of doing it because of history that intersected between a Jewish community and the Templars. And it allowed me to do what I need to. And because he was in Spain, since he was born in Spain in a Jewish community, it was possible for him to be both Jewish and Hispanic, which my social justice warrior friend told me that I would have been accused of having a twofer character. He was two minorities. But there was another instance where I do have a Middle Eastern character who was actually important to the plot. But I didn't make him Middle Eastern just to have diversity in my story. I did it because the story demanded that he was Middle Eastern. Let me explain. So in my universe, basically vampires exist and they're pulling the strings. And it's alternate history, so whatever historical events happen, I try to say that it was caused by the vampires in some way. Well, we've already established that the Templar Order exists in my universe, but there was another order that existed called the Assassins, which were in the Middle East. And in 1275, the group was disbanded. And I'm saying that it's because of the vampires. They were planning an invasion that is what my book takes place, is this vampire invasion that's going on. But they've been planning it for a long time. And so they saw that the Templars and the Assassins were major threats to them. So they disbanded the Assassins. Well, some of the Assassins sought asylum within the Templar Order. Not too long after that, the Templar Order disbanded in 1309. This group of assassins still remain and kind of form their own little secret society. They actually were adopted to be more of a spy network. And because of that, it allowed me to get the characters to be where they needed to be, because I could introduce this spy character to tell them where they needed to go. But in order to use this character, based on everything that I had already established, he had to be Middle Eastern descent. Even if he was born in France, he still was Middle Eastern descent. So, I felt that I had no choice but to make the character that race, and that his physical attributes match someone who was from that region of the world. I didn't insert the character in there just to have diversity in my story. It's nice that I do have diversity in there, but it wasn't important for me to have diversity. In fact, I thought for the longest time that my main character was... I didn't know what his sexuality was. Because the Templar Order really practiced celibacy. But since this... the Templar Order that's featured in this book is kind of like a former remnant of the once great order, because it's been disbanded for 40 years. Only one character takes a vow of celibacy seriously. The other characters, 2 of them are engaged to be married, and another one is already married. But one of the 5 characters is celibate. He doesn't have sex whatsoever. So I didn't know if he was straight. I didn't know if he was gay or asexual or what. I really had no idea whatsoever. And I wrote most of the book without knowing that. But then I introduced, as a tribute to Mercedes Carrera, I introduced her as a character. And the moment that I did that, I actually found out that my character is straight. But until I did that, I really did not know. I didn't really care what his sexuality was. I mean, the others were a little bit obvious. I kind of feel alone with the concept of only creating characters as they are and not trying to assert any politics. I certainly have a few stories on the back burner that I hope to write one day, and there are some gay characters spread throughout that. But I don't need them. I didn't put them in there just to have representation for the gay community. I could care less about that. It might sound callous of me, but I'm not going to put a character into a story just so some gay person out there can feel better about themselves. I'm hoping that when people read my stories, they connect to the character for whatever reason, and their sexuality is not a consideration of that. Why should it be? Why is sexuality so important of a character? We go back to Captain America. I mean, everything else we've looked at. We've looked at Elsa, we looked at Dumbledore, female Thor, transsexual Samus, gay Iceman, and gay Luke Skywalker. And that's all led us to this point right here, that we now must have a gay Captain America. We can't have a new character. We can't have someone come up and be gay. I mean, hell, let's go ahead and make a movie about Milo Yiannopoulos. Let him be gay, a gay superhero. There we go. I'm sure that'll piss a lot of people off, honestly, but this is a good quote here. Why do people feel a need to put sexuality with everything? Making someone gay isn't going to include you. Why do we need to transform already established characters into something they're not, just so someone might feel special about themselves? And I'm afraid that this is going to get a lot worse before it gets a lot better, and I suspect that Disney is going to cave in. Now, I don't think Captain America is going to be gay, but I do think that Disney is going to purposely put a character into their story just to appease these social justice warriors, pretty much like Marvel did. And hell, now Marvel's owned by Disney. But here's the kicker, and here's the last thing I really want to say on this issue. When we put a character in just for the purposes of appeasing people, we're actually doing them a disservice. I mean, how do we show that someone is gay other than just them saying it to be a proper representation? You know, I asked my social justice warrior friend about this. It's like, well, how would we show that the character is gay? And it's like, well, you know, if I was writing the story, it would be like they hold hands and they make out. And it's like, well, yeah, but none of your other characters do this. Why is it important that this gay character do all of those things? Well, that way people know he's gay. When we purposely insert someone in there just for the purpose of representation, all it's saying is these people are not normal. It really is saying that. And if that's what you want, you're going to get it. You're going to get a lot of characters that are put into something just to appease you, but it's going to be a poor representation. I mean, Jinx being one of my favorite characters of all time, him being gay was not a major part of who he was. It didn't define his character. It was just something extra about the character. What defined his character was his actions, what he did. You know, his ability, his personality. That is what defined the character. And his sexual preference did not. Just like the sexual preferences of all the other characters in Warehouse 13 did not define them at all. I'm not against having minority characters featured. I'm not against having gay characters. I'm not against having strong women. I'm not against minority. Here's the thing, we're going to end up making all of these characters a Mary Sue. Because to even give them any sort of negative trait, any sort of vice to the character that actually is a really bad thing, we're going to be accused of being racist, sexist, and homophobic. And this is why we're going to see a lot of white people out there in the major roles, a lot of white men. Because we can do whatever we want to them and no one's going to say anything about it. But you know what, social justice warriors? You're going to end up getting what you want. Because all these media companies are afraid of being seen as homophobic. They're going to be afraid of being seen as racist. And in turn, that's going to cause a lot of poor representations in movies and in TV shows. And these characters are going to be jokes. So that's going to do it for me today. I don't know if I really made my point today, but I really wanted to talk on this issue. I'm getting sick and tired of this issue, and it's been building up for many, many years now. And it's going to get a lot worse before we ever start seeing an improvement on this. Check out the bar down below. You've got my Twitter if you want to follow me there. You also got my Patreon down there, patreon.com/mad_cat. I am trying to raise money for medical costs. It's going to be a lot out of pocket, so any donation you can give me will be greatly appreciated. And if you don't want to do that, go down to the URL down there and it'll lead you to this page right here for my Dagar Legacy series. First book is free to download. Download it, read it, like it. Leave me a review. That actually helps me out a lot. If you really like it, consider buying the book that comes directly after that. Only $2.99. So once again, thank you for joining me today. And this is Mad Cat signing out.